But also Rashi's daughters lived in a time, and Rashi, of course, lived in the time too, when women had very high status in France. Women were learned. Rashi's daughters, we know their names, but there were other learned women, and actually in the Christian world there were several learned women right in the vicinity. We have Hildegard of Bingen, the abbess, and Heloise of Abelard. She is actually not very far away at the Paraclete. And the ruler of Troyes, for most of Rashi's daughter's life, was a woman, the Countess Adelaide. And so we have women with actual political power in this time. So you can't say medieval and feminist in the same sentence, but it is a time when women have more power and status than certainly we would imagine as what happened in the 11th century.
Maggie, tell us about Rashi's daughters and the period they lived in.
The time period that Rashi lives in is actually known as the 12th century Renaissance, which of course I had never heard of before. And everything that I thought I knew about Jews and women in the Middle Ages was wrong. Jews did not live in ghettos. There was no blood libel. There wasn't even hardly any anti-Semitism. There was no Black Death, no Inquisition. Jews were not despised moneylenders. There were many different professions. And I learned that Jewish women were certainly not stuck in their houses, ignorant and pregnant. Jewish women, as I was trying to find out if Yocheved and Miriam and Rachel, Rashi's daughters, actually wore tefillin, as the legend said, as I did research, I discovered that the answer to that was maybe, because some women in Rashi's time did wear tefillin. Some women in Rashi's time wore tzitzit, not a tallis. We don't have prayer shawls until like the 1400s, but they did attach the fringes to four-cornered garments like cloaks and mantles. And we know that women were wearing these because we have written in legal texts from this time. Luckily, Hebrew is a gendered language. When you say they masculine, it could be all men, it could be men and women mixed, it could be 100 women and one man, and you'll use masculine they. If you use feminine they, it's women and only women. And it says quite clearly, when they, feminine, wear tzitzit, they, feminine, must say the blessing. We know that women were wearing tzitzit. We know that women in Rashi's time, some of them, or a few of them, blew the shofar. Because again, it says if a woman is ill, if she's had a baby, if she can't get to Rosh Hashanah she can't go to the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, we send another woman to blow the shofar for her. We know women were doing circumcisions. There were mohalot in Rashi's time. We know that women attended synagogue as often as the men. They knew the prayers. If you go to synagogue, and hear the Torah read 3 times a week for your whole life, believe me, you're going to know the Torah. And speaking of Torah, we have evidence that in Rashi's time, women had aliyah to the Torah. In those days, Hebrew is the language of the Jews. This is what they read, this is what they write. Plenty of Jewish women knew Hebrew. So to go up and read Torah would not have been particularly onerous for them. The question they had in Rashi's time was whether women should say the blessing. But the way they did aliyah in those days, only the first person, the first aliyah, had the opening blessing, the last reader had the closing blessing, so they decided that women could have the middle aliyot because they don't say any blessing. So a man had to do the first one and the last one, women could be in the middle. And so that's how we know the women even had aliyah to the Torah in those days. They made changes to women's status in marriage that totally changed marriage to the benefit of women, even gave them the power in marriage over the husbands. 3 takanot made by Rabbi Gershon, Rashi's teacher, had changed this phenomenally. First one, Jewish men can only have one wife at a time. Up until that time, it was as the Torah and the Talmud said, and then it could have as many wives as he want. Abraham had 2, Jacob had 4, but that's it. In Ashkenaz, the German, French world, Jews living under the Christians, Jewish men only got 1 wife. Next change, next takana, had to do with divorce. According to the Torah, the Talmud, a man finds something unseemly in his wife, he writes her a get, gives her the bill of divorce, they're divorced. She doesn't get to say, wait, I want to talk to my lawyer, and let's do marriage counseling, or any protest whatsoever. He unilaterally acquires her in marriage, and he unilaterally unacquires her in marriage. Rabbi Gershon changed that. He said a woman cannot be divorced unless she consents. In Rashi's time, here's the third one. This is the one that the Israeli women opened up their eyes wide when I was talking there. Women had a mechanism to divorce their husbands in Rashi's time, something that is not available to Orthodox women or women in the state of Israel under the current rabbinate. And they would go to the Beit Din, the Jewish court. There's just one thing you said. It didn't matter why you didn't like your husband anymore. And you say, I find this man repulsive. I can no longer live with him. The court's response, no one should have to share a basket with a snake, was certainly sympathetic. And the court would compel the man to divorce his wife by threatening him with cherem, with excommunication. This worked because Jewish merchants all depended on other Jews in which to do their buying and selling and trading, and a Jewish man in cherem was essentially out of business. We also find that there was a power to the women in their marriage contract, in the ketubah. The normal amount in a modern ketubah is 200 zuz, and if you think back to Passover, where 2 zuzim got you a goat, 200 zuz would have been 100 goats, would have been quite a good amount of property. And the French translated 200 zuz in Rashi's time as 200 dinars, the amount of money the man would earn in several years. And this is what the woman got if he died or he divorced her, and she got it before any of his other creditors. The woman brought the dowry. That was negotiable how much it was. But the man only got the dowry and the ketubah if they were married long enough that when she died, there were children, and then the children would inherit the dowry. The woman got the dowry and the ketubah if the man divorced her or if he died. If she initiated divorce, she forfeited the ketubah, but she kept the dowry. If she died before there were children, the dowry went back to her father. You had no poor widows or divorcees. They all had their ketubah, and they quickly got another husband and another ketubah. We see in the business contracts, in responsive literature, women's names as supplying capital for these trading missions where a Jewish merchant would go to the eastern land and buy the silks and the spices and jewels and whatever, bring it back to the West and sell it and make a good profit. Women are supplying the capital. So you have women with actual financial power. You have women with high status in their marriage, women who know the rituals and are active in the religion. So it was a different world, in some ways better than today. And we imagine nowadays, 900 years later, we're the first ones to wear a tallis, the first group of women to blow the shofar or have aliyah to the Torah. Not so. They were doing it in Rashi's community 900 years ago. So it was amazing for me to discover all these things that women were doing. My first amazement was, oh my goodness, we are not the first generation. This was going on 900 years ago. And then I became more amazed. How come nobody knows about this? How come nobody teaches about this? We have no idea. And it's not that it was particularly suppressed, because no one knows about the entire 12th century Renaissance. And that's what really gave me the idea to write these novels about Rashi's daughters, was to demonstrate in a novel, by writing about the lives of Rashi's daughters and the lives of the women in their community, how they were doing all this stuff, how women studied Talmud. And believe me, in my novels, you get 15 sugya of Talmud, at least in each one. Rashi and his daughters studying, or the daughters when they get older studying with each other. Women are certainly going to learn Talmud by reading my books. And frankly, that's the stealth reason for writing them, to get more women, more liberal Jews, but in particular to get more women to want to study these texts. The world is different now. The last 10, 15 years, there's yeshivot for women. Girls are studying in Jewish high schools Talmud. We're no longer excluded. We're no longer forbidden to study this text. It's out there. It's available to us. And this is where Jewish law comes from. And if we want to be a part of making Jewish law, then we need to be as knowledgeable on these texts as all the men are.
Thank you, Maggie.